8 months pregnant, standing in freezing rain outside iron gates. That's where Lena Russo learned the cruelest lesson about power, love, and survival. Her husband, Victor Romano, one of the city's most feared men, told her to wait. Just 10 minutes, he promised. But while she shivered in the cold, clinging to faith in her unborn child, he was inside choosing everything except her. What happened that night didn't just break a marriage. It shattered illusions, exposed betrayals, and forced two people to confront whether love can survive when trust dies in the cold. If you want to see how far a heart can fall before it learns to rise again, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The rain had turned to sleet somewhere around midnight, each frozen droplet striking the pavement with a sound like breaking glass. Lena Russo stood beneath the single street lamp outside the Castellano estate, one hand pressed protectively over her swollen belly, the other clutching her phone like a lifeline. The screen was dark now, battery at 3%, the last of her calls unanswered. "Just 10 minutes, Victor had said. "Wait by the car. I need to handle something quick." That was 2 hours ago. The cold had worked its way through her coat, past the layers she'd worn, because Victor always kept his meetings running late, always underestimated how long business would take. Her feet ached in the heels she'd worn because he liked when she dressed up, even for these late-night obligations that she barely understood. The baby kicked against her ribs, strong, insistent movements that would have made her smile on any other night. Tonight, each kick felt like a question she couldn't answer. Where is he? Why hasn't he come back? The Castellano mansion rose before her like something from another era, all stone and iron and windows that glowed with warm yellow light. She could see shadows moving behind the curtains on the second floor, shapes that might have been people, might have been nothing. The gates were closed, locked from the inside, and the intercom Victor had used to announce their arrival remained silent, no matter how many times she'd pressed the button. She'd stopped trying after the first hour. Lena shifted her weight, trying to ease the pressure in her lower back. At 8 months, everything hurt. Her feet, her hips, the place where the baby's head pressed down with increasing insistence. Dr. Morrison had warned her about spending too much time on her feet. "You need rest," she'd said at the last appointment, her expression concerned as she'd reviewed Lena's blood pressure readings. "This pregnancy is high risk. Your body is under enough stress without you pushing yourself." But what choice did she have? Victor's world didn't accommodate pregnancy complications or doctor's orders. It moved according to rules she was still learning, hierarchies she didn't fully understand. When he said, "Come with me," she came. When he said, "Wait," she waited. Even when waiting meant standing in freezing rain while her baby kicked and her body screamed for rest. The wind picked up, cutting through the gaps in her coat. Lena wrapped her arms tighter around herself, humming softly, a lullaby her mother used to sing. The baby seemed to respond, the frantic kicking settling into gentler movements. For a moment, standing there in the cold, it was just the two of them, mother and child. The only relationship in her life that felt simple anymore. "Just a little longer," she whispered, though whether she was talking to the baby or herself, she wasn't sure. "He'll come. He said he would." Her phone buzzed, a final death rattle before the screen went black. 3% to 0 in the time it took her heart to leap with hope and crash back down. She pressed the power button uselessly, knowing it wouldn't respond, knowing she'd lost her last connection to the outside world. The realization settled over her like the sleet, cold, relentless, impossible to shake off. She was alone. Lena looked up at the mansion again, at those warm golden windows. Somewhere inside, Victor was conducting business, making deals, securing territory, doing whatever it was that men like him did when they disappeared into rooms and emerged hours later smelling of cigars and expensive whiskey. She'd learned not to ask too many questions, learned that his world had boundaries she wasn't meant to cross, doors that stayed closed to wives who were supposed to understand without being told. But standing there, feeling the cold seep into her bones while her baby moved restlessly inside her, Lena wondered what understanding had cost her. Another contraction, not labor, just the Braxton Hicks that had been plaguing her for weeks, tightened across her belly. She breathed through it, one hand braced against the iron gate, the other cradling her stomach. The contraction passed, but it left her shaking, left her aware of how vulnerable she was, standing outside in weather that could turn dangerous, her body already pushed to its limits. He wouldn't forget me, she told herself. He's just delayed. Business ran long. He'll come. But even as she thought it, doubt crept in like the cold. Because this wasn't the first time Victor had lost track of time. Wasn't the first time his promises had stretched and broken under the weight of whatever he deemed more important. Over the 8 months of her pregnancy, she'd watched him drift further away. Phone calls that took him out of rooms. Late nights that became early mornings. A distance in his eyes even when he was standing right beside her. She'd told herself it was stress. The pressures of his position. The complications that came with running an empire built on foundations she'd rather not examine too closely. But standing there, teeth chattering, baby kicking, phone dead in her hand, Lena couldn't hide behind those explanations anymore. The truth was simpler and more brutal. Victor had told her to wait, and she was waiting. Because that's what she always did. Because somewhere in the 2 years since she'd married him, since she'd left behind her quiet life teaching 3rd grade to become the wife of a man who commanded rooms with his presence and fear with his name, she'd forgotten how to do anything else. Movement caught her eye, a car pulling up to the gate from the inside. For a moment, hope flared so bright it hurt. But as the vehicle drew closer, she saw it wasn't Victor's black Mercedes. This was a silver Lexus, sleek and unfamiliar. The window rolled down, revealing a man she didn't recognize. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of face that had seen things and learned not to react. "You're still out here?" His voice carried surprise, but not concern. "Romano didn't send you home?" Lena straightened, trying to summon some dignity despite the fact that she was shivering, pregnant, and clearly abandoned. "He said he'd only be a few minutes. I'm waiting." The man's expression shifted, something that might have been pity crossing his features before he smoothed it away. "Lady, that was hours ago. Whatever meeting he's in, it's not wrapping up anytime soon." "Then I'll keep waiting." "In this weather? In your condition?" He glanced at her belly, then back at her face. "That's not smart. I don't need... Look, I don't know you, and I don't know your situation with Romano. But standing out here in the cold isn't going to make him remember you're waiting. It's just going to make you sick." He reached for something in his console, pulled out a business card. "There's a cafe 3 blocks down. Still open. Go there. Get warm. Call yourself a car. Romano's got my number. I'll let him know where you went." Lena stared at the card in his outstretched hand. The logical part of her brain, the part that wasn't freezing, wasn't exhausted, wasn't clinging to faith in a man who'd left her standing in sleet for 2 hours, knew he was right. Knew that staying here accomplished nothing except putting herself and the baby at risk. But accepting that card meant accepting something else, meant admitting that Victor had forgotten her. That whatever was happening inside those warm, golden-lit rooms was more important than the wife waiting outside, the pregnant wife, the wife carrying his child. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "But thank you." The man studied her for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "Your choice." He pocketed the card, rolled up his window, and the gate swung open to let him through. As it closed again with a metallic clang, Lena was alone once more. The cold seemed worse after that brief exchange. Or maybe she was just more aware of it, more aware of how her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves, how her toes felt like blocks of ice, how the shivering had become constant, uncontrollable. Another contraction gripped her, stronger this time. Lena gasped, doubling over slightly, one hand on the gate for support. It passed after 30 seconds, but it left her breathless, left her scared in a way she hadn't been before. Not labor, she told herself firmly. Just Braxton Hicks, just practice. The baby isn't due for another month, but her body didn't seem to care what the calendar said. Another contraction followed 5 minutes later, then another. The pattern was irregular, the intensity varying, but each one left her a little more shaken, a little more aware that she was in trouble. She needed to call someone, needed help. But her phone was dead, the intercom wasn't working, and the only person who could open those gates was inside doing business that apparently couldn't be interrupted, even for his wife's well-being. Lena pressed her forehead against the cold iron, fighting back tears. She wouldn't cry. Couldn't cry. Because if she started, she might not stop. And she needed to stay strong. Needed to stay focused. For the baby. For herself. For whatever shred of dignity she had left. "Victor," she whispered into the night. "Please, Please come back. But the only answer was the wind and the sleet and the distant sound of the city that never slept. A city that had no room for pregnant women abandoned outside locked gates. Inside the mansion, in a room that smelled of leather and cigars, Victor Romano stood at a window overlooking the grounds. From this height, he couldn't see the front gate, couldn't see the figure in the dark coat standing beneath the street lamp. His phone sat face down on a side table, set to silent, the screen dark. He'd come to the Castellano estate for business, a meeting with Marco Castellano and his associates to discuss territory agreements and profit splits. The kind of meeting that required focus, required his full attention, required him to present the image of a man who was always in control, always 3 steps ahead. The kind of meeting he couldn't afford to have interrupted by a pregnant wife who didn't understand that some things took priority. Just 10 minutes, he'd told Lena. But the meeting had stretched, as these things always did. One discussion bleeding into another, one drink turning into 3, until hours had passed and the rain outside had turned to sleet, and Victor had stopped checking the time. "Romano, you listening?" Marco's voice cut through his thoughts. Victor turned from the window, smoothing his expression into something neutral and attentive. "Every word." "Then you understand what we're proposing. The docks stay neutral territory. We split the revenue 60-40 in your favor, provided your people keep the shipments clean. And if there's interference, then we renegotiate." Marco leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile on his face. He was a man in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, who'd built his empire on knowing when to push and when to pull back. "But I don't anticipate problems. You've always been reliable." Reliable? The word settled in Victor's chest with uncomfortable weight. He'd built his reputation on being reliable, on being the man people could count on to deliver, to follow through, to keep his word. In business, that reliability was worth more than gold. But standing there, with the sound of sleet against the windows and the faint memory of Lena's face as he'd told her to wait, Victor wondered what reliability meant when it came to the people who actually mattered. "We have a deal," he said, shaking Marco's hand. The grip was firm, professional, the kind of handshake that sealed arrangements worth millions. "Excellent. Then let's drink to it." Marco poured whiskey into crystal glasses, the amber liquid catching the light. "To profitable partnerships." Victor raised his glass, but the whiskey tasted like ash. Around him, the other men in the room, associates, advisors, men whose loyalty was bought and maintained through careful cultivation, talked and laughed. Someone told a joke. Someone else brought up the upcoming election and how it might affect their operations. The conversation flowed like it always did, business bleeding into casual discussion, the hours slipping past. Victor's phone buzzed against the table. Once, twice, 3 times. He didn't reach for it, because reaching for it would mean seeing whatever messages Lena had sent, would mean acknowledging that he'd left her waiting far longer than 10 minutes, would mean having to explain to these men who valued strength, who saw vulnerability as weakness, that his pregnant wife was outside in the cold because he'd lost track of time. So he left the phone where it was, told himself he'd check it soon, told himself Lena would understand, told himself the lies that let him stay in that warm room, drinking expensive whiskey, while outside the temperature dropped and the sleet turned harder and his wife's faith in him began to break. Another buzz, this one longer, insistent. Marco glanced at the phone, then at Victor. "You want to get that?" "It can wait." "You sure? Sounds urgent." "I'm sure." Victor's voice came out harder than he'd intended. "We were discussing the election?" The conversation shifted back, but Victor felt Marco's eyes on him, felt the weight of that look, the assessment, the judgment. Because men like Marco didn't get where they were by missing details, didn't build empires by failing to notice when someone was avoiding something. The phone buzzed again, then fell silent. Victor told himself it was for the best, told himself that Lena was probably just impatient, unused to how these meetings worked, that she'd be fine waiting a little longer, that she was safe in the car, protected from the weather, comfortable enough. He told himself a lot of things that night. All of them were easier than looking at his phone. Outside, Lena's knees gave out. One moment she was standing, breathing through another contraction. The next, she was on the ground, the cold pavement biting through her coat, her hands scraped raw from trying to catch herself. The baby kicked frantically, distressed movements that made Lena's heart race with fear. "I'm okay," she gasped, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the baby or herself. "We're okay, we're—" Another contraction cut off the words. This one was different, sharper, deeper, unmistakably real. Not practice, not Braxton Hicks. This was her body saying something is wrong. Lena tried to push herself up, but her arms were shaking too badly. The cold had worked its way into her muscles, into her bones, making every movement feel like wading through water. She managed to get to her hands and knees, but that was as far as she could go. Above her, the mansion glowed with warm light. Through one of the windows, she could see shapes moving. Men in suits, drinks in hand. One of them laughed, the sound carrying through the night, sharp and clear. They were 50 feet away, maybe less. Close enough that if she screamed, they might hear her, but Lena couldn't scream, could barely breathe. The contraction had her in its grip, and all she could do was endure it, kneeling on the frozen pavement while the sleet soaked through her clothes and her baby kicked, and her faith in Victor Romano finally, irreversibly shattered. When the contraction passed, she tried her phone one more time, pressed the power button with numb fingers, praying for even 1% of battery, just enough to call for help. The screen stayed dark. "Help," she whispered into the night. "Please, someone help." But no one came. Inside the mansion, Victor poured himself another whiskey. And outside, in the cold and the dark, Lena Russo stopped waiting for a man who'd forgotten she existed. She closed her eyes, wrapped her arms around her belly, and let the darkness take her. The last thing she felt was the baby's kick, strong, insistent, alive. The last thing she thought was a prayer that had nothing to do with divine intervention and everything to do with desperation. "Please let someone find us. Please don't let my baby die because I believed in the wrong man." Then there was nothing but the cold, the dark, and the distant sound of laughter from a room where Victor Romano raised his glass and smiled at jokes he didn't find funny, in a meeting that would cost him everything that actually mattered. The sleet continued to fall. The night stretched on. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed. The security guard found her at 2:47 a.m. James Cardello had been making his rounds of the Castellano estate perimeter when his flashlight caught something that didn't belong. A dark shape crumpled against the iron gate. At first he thought it was trash blown against the bars by the wind. Then the shape moved, just slightly, and his blood ran cold. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, breaking into a run. Up close it was worse. A woman, heavily pregnant, lying on her side on the frozen pavement. Her lips were blue, her skin waxy pale. Ice crystals had formed in her dark hair. She wasn't moving now, wasn't responding when he touched her shoulder. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" Nothing. James pulled out his radio with shaking hands. "This is Cardello at the front gate. I need an ambulance immediately. Pregnant woman, unconscious, possible hypothermia. She's—" He checked for a pulse, found it weak and thready. "She's alive but barely responsive. Get someone here now." He stripped off his jacket, laying it over her. Her coat was soaked through, useless against the cold. How long had she been out here? And why the hell was a pregnant woman lying outside the estate in the middle of the night? The radio crackled. "Ambulance is en route. ETA, 6 minutes. Do you know who she is?" James swept his flashlight over her face, and recognition hit him like a fist to the gut. He'd seen her before, getting out of Victor Romano's car, walking beside him at events, always quiet, always in his shadow. "It's Romano's wife," he said into the radio. "Someone get Romano, now." Inside the mansion, the meeting had finally wound down. Victor stood by the door, shaking hands, making promises to follow up, playing the role he'd perfected over years of navigating the delicate politics of their world. His head buzzed slightly from the whiskey, his shoulders tight from hours of calculated conversation. "Good meeting," Marco said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Your wife must be ready to kill you by now. What time did you tell her you'd be done?" The question landed like a blade between Victor's ribs. His wife, Lena, waiting in the car. How long had it been? 2 hours? 3? He pulled out his phone and his stomach dropped. 7 missed calls. 4 text messages. The last one sent almost an hour ago. "Victor, please, I'm so cold. The baby, please." "Fuck," he whispered. "Romano?" Marco's voice carried concern now. Everything okay? Victor was already moving toward the door, his heart pounding. I need to. Lena was waiting. I told her just a few minutes, but he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The look on Marco's face said enough. A mixture of judgment and something that might have been pity. Victor burst through the front entrance and into the night. The sleet hit his face like tiny knives. Lena, his voice echoed off the stone walls. And Lena, I'm sorry. I'm coming. He ran toward where he'd left the car, expecting to see her inside, maybe angry, maybe asleep. But as he got closer, the car came into view, empty. Driver's seat vacant, passenger seat vacant. No sign of his wife anywhere. Lena? Panic edged into his voice now. Lena, where are you? That's when he heard the sirens, saw the flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement, saw the security guard running toward him from the front gate, his face pale with urgency. Mr. Romano, thank God. It's your wife. She collapsed at the gate. The ambulance just arrived. The world tilted. Victor broke into a sprint, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet ground. When he reached the gate, the scene that greeted him would stay burned into his memory for the rest of his life. Lena on a stretcher, paramedics working over her, an oxygen mask over her face, an IV being started in her arm, her skin so pale it looked translucent in the harsh lights of the ambulance, and her belly, her pregnant belly, strapped with monitors, the paramedics exchanging looks that Victor had seen enough times in his line of work to recognize as bad news. That's my wife, he said, pushing forward. That's... What happened? Is she okay? Is the baby... Sir, step back, please. The female paramedic didn't look up from what she was doing. We need space to work. But she's... I'm her husband. Tell me what's wrong. The paramedic finally glanced at him, and the look in her eyes was pure ice. Your wife is hypothermic, dehydrated, and in premature labor. Her core temperature is 89 degrees. The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to get her to the hospital immediately. Premature labor? But she's only 8 months. Sir. The paramedic's voice cut through his panic like a knife. Where were you while your wife was lying outside in freezing weather? Because the security guard estimates she's been out here for hours. The accusation in those words hit harder than any physical blow. Victor opened his mouth to explain, to defend himself, but what could he say? That he was inside drinking whiskey? That he'd silenced his phone? That he'd forgotten his pregnant wife was waiting for him? I was in a meeting, he managed. I didn't realize... You didn't realize. The paramedic returned her attention to Lena, her movement sharp with barely controlled anger. Well, hopefully you realize now. Load her up. We need to move. They lifted the stretcher, and Victor caught a glimpse of Lena's face beneath the oxygen mask. Her eyes were closed, her expression slack. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the woman he'd married, the woman who'd laughed at his jokes, who'd challenged him when he got too caught up in business, who'd looked at him like he hung the moon. I'm coming with you, he said, climbing into the ambulance. No space. Follow in your car. The paramedic blocked his path. And sir, when we get to the hospital, you might want to prepare yourself. In cases like this, with hypothermia and premature labor, outcomes aren't always positive. The doors slammed shut before Victor could respond. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, leaving him standing in the sleet with those words echoing in his head. Outcomes aren't always positive. His wife, his baby, both at risk because he'd been too caught up in business to check his phone, too concerned with maintaining his reputation to remember the woman who'd given up everything to be with him. Victor ran to his car, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and panic. His mind kept replaying the image of Lena on that stretcher, so still, so pale. Kept hearing the paramedic's voice. Where were you? Where was he? He was being Victor Romano, feared businessman, respected leader. He was being the man everyone expected him to be, powerful, focused, untouchable. He just forgot to be a husband, forgot to be the man Lena needed. The hospital emergency entrance was chaos when he arrived. Victor abandoned his car in the first available spot and ran inside, his wet shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Lena Romano, he gasped at the reception desk. My wife. She just came in. Pregnant, hypothermia, room 4, trauma bay. The receptionist pointed down the hallway. But sir, you can't... Victor was already moving, He followed the signs, the sound of urgent voices leading him to a set of double doors marked authorized personnel only. Through the small windows, he could see Lena surrounded by what looked like a dozen medical staff. Machines beeped. Someone called out numbers. A doctor barked orders. "Sir, you can't be here." A nurse appeared at his elbow. "Family needs to wait in the waiting room." "That's my wife, my baby." "I understand, but you don't understand." Victor's voice rose, desperation bleeding through the carefully maintained control. "She was waiting for me. Outside in the cold because I told her to wait, and then I forgot. I forgot she was there. So if something happens to her, if something happens to our baby, it's my fault. Do you understand that? It's my fault." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Romano, the best thing you can do right now is let the doctors work. They're doing everything possible, but I need you to step back and let them do their job." "How long until I know something?" "I can't say. Every case is different, but someone will come talk to you as soon as we have information. The waiting room is down the hall. There's coffee, and I don't want coffee." Victor pressed his hands against the glass, watching the controlled chaos around Lena's bed. "I want my wife to be okay." "Then let us help her, please." It took everything Victor had to step away from those doors, to walk down that hallway to the waiting room with its uncomfortable plastic chairs and flickering fluorescent lights, to sit down and realize that for the first time in years, he had absolutely no control over what happened next. His phone rang. Marco's name on the screen. "Is she alive?" Marco's voice was tight. "Romano, talk to me." "I don't know. They're working on her. The baby, they said the baby's heart rate was dropping." Well, silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus, Victor, I'm sorry. If I'd known..." "Known what?" "That I'm the kind of man who leaves his pregnant wife outside in the cold? That I'm so goddamn focused on business that I can't even remember to check my phone?" Victor's laugh was bitter, broken. "This is on me. All of it. What do you need?" "I need to go back 3 hours and make a different choice. I need to not be the man who did this." Victor ran a hand through his wet hair. "But since I can't do that, I need to wait and hope that my wife and baby survive my stupidity." "Victor, I have to go. I'll call you when I know something." He ended the call before Marco could respond, dropped his head into his hands and tried to breathe through the panic clawing at his chest. Around him, the hospital hummed with late-night activity. A baby crying somewhere, someone coughing, the intercom calling for doctors. Life continuing like his world wasn't potentially ending behind those double doors. His phone buzzed with text. His associates checking in, word having spread through the network with the speed that information always traveled in their world. He ignored them all. Ignored everything except the clock on the wall and the sound of his own heartbeat and the memory of Lena's face when he'd told her to wait. Just 10 minutes, he'd said. Such a small lie. Such massive consequences. An hour passed. Then 2. Victor's coffee sat untouched, gone cold. His clothes had dried, stiff with salt and rain. He'd worn a path in the linoleum from pacing, unable to sit still, unable to do anything except move and wait and pray to something he wasn't sure he believed in. Finally, the double doors opened. A doctor emerged, still wearing scrubs marked with blood, Lena's blood. Victor was on his feet before the man had taken 2 steps. "Mr. Romano?" The doctor's face was professionally neutral. "I'm Dr. Chen. I've been treating your wife. Is she alive?" "Yes. We've stabilized her core temperature and stopped the premature labor." "But Mr. Romano, I need you to understand, your wife went through a severe trauma tonight. Hypothermia, extreme stress, dehydration. The fact that she's alive is almost miraculous." "And the baby?" Dr. Chen's expression shifted and Victor's heart stopped. "The baby's heart rate stabilized once we got your wife warmed up. But we're keeping close monitoring. The next 48 hours are critical. If we can keep the labor from restarting, if we can give the baby more time to develop, the prognosis is much better." "But there's a chance." Victor heard the desperation in his own voice. "They could both be okay. There's a chance. Your wife is strong. She fought hard to protect that baby." Dr. Chen paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The paramedics told me she was found outside the Castellano estate, that she'd been there for hours. I was in a meeting. I lost track of time." Mr. Romano, I'm not here to judge your choices, but I am here to tell you that your wife nearly died tonight. That baby nearly died tonight. And if that security guard had been 15 minutes later, he let the sentence hang. Victor felt something crack inside his chest. Can I see her? She's sedated. We gave her something to help her rest, to keep her calm and prevent the labor from restarting. She won't be able to talk to you. But yes, you can see her. 5 minutes. Dr. Chen led him through the double doors, past the trauma bay, into a quieter hallway. Room 412. The door was partially open, revealing a dim interior lit only by the soft glow of medical equipment. 5 minutes, Dr. Chen repeated. Then we need to let her rest. Victor nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He stepped into the room, and the sight of Lena in that hospital bed nearly brought him to his knees. She looked so small against the white sheets. IVS ran from both arms. Monitors tracked her vital signs. Heart rate steady now, oxygen levels improving. The swell of her pregnant belly was visible beneath the blanket, strapped with fetal monitors. Her face was still pale, but had more color than when he'd seen her on that stretcher. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, finally dry. She looked like everything he'd never realized he needed until it was almost too late. Victor approached the bed slowly, afraid that even his presence might disturb her. Up close, he could see the damage. The scrapes on her hands from where she'd fallen, the bruise forming on her cheek, the way her lips were chapped and cracked from the cold. Evidence of what waiting for him had cost her. "Lena," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." She didn't respond, didn't even stir. The sedatives held her in deep sleep, protecting her from the trauma her body had endured, protecting her from him. Victor reached out, then hesitated. Did he have the right to touch her? After what he'd done, after how thoroughly he'd failed her, did he deserve even that small comfort? But the need was too strong. He took her hand gently, carefully avoiding the IV. Her fingers were still cool but warming. He could feel her pulse beneath his thumb, steady, alive. "I forgot you," he said softly. "I forgot you were waiting, and I know—" His voice broke. "I know that's unforgivable. I know I don't deserve another chance. But Lena, if you can hear me, I need you to know that I'm here now. I'm not leaving. Whatever happens next, whatever you decide when you wake up, I'm here." The fetal monitor beeped steadily, the baby's heartbeat strong and regular now, a life that had almost been lost because Victor couldn't be bothered to check his phone. "I'm going to be better," he continued. "I'm going to be the man you thought you were marrying, the man who puts you first, the man who doesn't forget that his pregnant wife is waiting outside in freezing weather because a business meeting ran long." He laughed bitterly. "Who am I kidding? I don't know if I can be that man. I don't know if I know how, but I'm going to try. For you, for our baby, I'm going to try." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Romano, time's up. She needs to rest." Victor nodded, not trusting his voice. He squeezed Lena's hand gently. "I'll be right outside. I'm not going anywhere." He released her hand and stepped back, memorizing her face. The woman he'd married, the woman carrying his child, the woman he'd almost killed through negligence. In the hallway, Dr. Chen was waiting. "Mr. Romano, we have her in a private room. She'll stay here for at least 48 hours, possibly longer, depending on her recovery. You're welcome to stay, but I'd suggest going home, getting some rest." "I'm staying." "Mr. Romano, I left her once tonight. I'm not doing it again." Victor's voice was steel. "I don't care if I have to sleep in a chair. I'm staying." Dr. Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "There's a chair that converts to a bed. The nurses can show you. But Mr. Romano, when your wife wakes up, she's going to have questions. She's going to want to know what happened, why she was left outside. Are you prepared to answer those questions honestly?" "I don't know, but I owe her the truth." "Then I hope you're ready, because from what I understand, the truth isn't going to be easy for either of you to hear." Dr. Chen walked away, leaving Victor alone in the hallway with his thoughts and his guilt and the weight of consequences he'd never meant to set in motion. He returned to Lena's room, to the chair the nurse had converted. It was uncomfortable, too small, positioned awkwardly beside the bed. But Victor settled into it, his eyes never leaving his wife's face. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages, calls, demands for his attention. He silenced it without looking. Let them wait. Let the business wait. Let the entire empire he'd built wait. Tonight, tomorrow, for however long it took, there was only one thing that mattered: the woman in the bed and the baby she carried. The family he'd almost destroyed. The future that hung in the balance, dependent on choices he hadn't made yet but knew he needed to. Outside the window, the sleet had stopped. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. A new day beginning, a second chance he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Victor reached out and took Lena's hand again. This time, he didn't let go. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not perfect. I'm probably going to mess this up 100 more times, but I'm here. And I'm not leaving. Not again. Never again." The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The baby's heartbeat strong. Lena's breathing even and deep. Two lives continuing despite his failures, despite everything he'd done wrong. Victor closed his eyes and made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but knew he had to try. He would be better. He would change. He would become the man Lena deserved, the father their child needed. He would earn back the trust he'd shattered in the cold outside those gates. Or he would die trying, because losing them wasn't an option. Not anymore. Not when he just realized how much they meant, how empty his empire was without them, how powerless he truly was when the only thing that mattered was slipping through his fingers. The sun rose higher, spilling golden light through the hospital window. And Victor Romano, feared businessman, powerful leader, sat in an uncomfortable chair holding his wife's hand and finally understood what it meant to be truly afraid. Not of enemies or rivals or the dangers that came with his position, but of losing the only thing that made any of it worthwhile. Lena woke to the sound of machines and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the memories came flooding back, the cold, the gate, the contractions, the darkness closing in. Her hand flew to her belly, panic surging through her chest. "The baby," she gasped. "Is the baby?" "The baby's fine." A nurse appeared at her bedside, calm and efficient. "Heart rate is good. You're both stable. Try to stay calm, Mrs. Romano. Stress isn't good for either of you." Lena forced herself to breathe, to focus on the monitor beside her bed, the steady beep, beep, beep of her baby's heartbeat. Alive. Safe. For now. "How long have I been here?" "About 14 hours. You were brought in early this morning. It's almost 6 p.m. now." 14 hours. Lena closed her eyes, trying to piece together what happened after she'd collapsed. She remembered the cold, the pain, the fear. Then nothing. "Your husband has been here the whole time," the nurse added, adjusting one of the IVs. "He stepped out about 20 minutes ago to make some calls. Should be back any—" The door opened and Victor walked in. Lena's first instinct was relief, a deep, visceral reaction to seeing him that made her hate herself. Because even after everything, even after being left in the cold, her treacherous heart still leapt at the sight of him. Then reality crashed back in, and with it came something colder than the sleet that had nearly killed her. Anger. Victor stopped just inside the door, and Lena saw something she'd rarely witnessed in the 2 years she'd known him. Fear. Raw, undisguised fear in his eyes as he looked at her. "Lena." Her name came out rough, broken. "You're awake." She stared at him, this man she'd married, this man she'd trusted with everything. He looked terrible, his expensive suit rumpled and stained, his face drawn with exhaustion, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked like a man who'd been through hell. Good. Because so had she. "I'll give you some privacy," the nurse said quietly, slipping from the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. Victor took a step closer, then stopped, as if uncertain whether he had the right to approach her bed. Smart man, because Lena wasn't sure she could handle him being close right now, wasn't sure what she might say or do if he touched her. "How are you feeling?" he asked finally. The question was so absurd, so inadequate, that Lena almost laughed. "How am I feeling? I'm in a hospital bed because I collapsed from hypothermia and went into premature labor. How do you think I'm feeling, Victor?" He flinched. "Lena, where were you?" The words came out quiet but sharp as knives. "I stood outside for 3 hours. 3 hours in the freezing cold while I was 8 months pregnant. I called you. I texted you. And you didn't answer. So I need to know, Victor, where were you that was so important you couldn't pick up your phone? I was in the meeting with Marco, and for 3 hours, you couldn't check your phone once in 3 hours? Victor's jaw tightened. I had it on silent. I didn't want to be interrupted. You didn't want to be interrupted. Lena repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. Your pregnant wife was waiting outside in the cold, and you didn't want to be interrupted. I thought you were in the car. I thought you were safe and warm and just waiting. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't check. Lena's voice was rising now, months of frustration and loneliness and feeling invisible finally breaking through. You didn't know because you decided a business meeting was more important than making sure I was okay. You told me 10 minutes, Victor. 10 minutes. I know, and I'm... Don't. She held up a hand, cutting him off. Don't say you're sorry, because sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't change the fact that our baby almost died because you forgot I existed. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and true. Victor looked like she'd struck him. He moved to the chair beside her bed, sinking into it like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. I forgot. I got caught up in the meeting, in the negotiations, in being the man everyone expects me to be. And I forgot the most important thing. I forgot you. Lena wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to that rage because it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. But looking at him now, at the defeat in his shoulders, the genuine anguish in his eyes, she felt something else creeping in, something that felt dangerously like sympathy. She crushed it down. He didn't deserve her sympathy. Not yet. Maybe not ever. This isn't the first time, she said. You've been forgetting me for months, missing appointments, coming home late, checking your phone in the middle of conversations. I kept telling myself it was just stress, just the business, just temporary. But last night proved something I've been too afraid to admit. What? That I'm not a priority to you, that when it comes down to it, I'll always come second to your empire. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her palm. We both will. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. That's not true. Isn't it? Then tell me, Victor, when was the last time you put me first? When was the last time you chose me over a meeting, over a deal, over your reputation? Silence. The kind of silence that answered questions better than words ever could. That's what I thought, Lena whispered. I'm going to change. Victor looked up, and the desperation in his eyes was almost painful to witness. I know I've messed up. I know I've taken you for granted. But last night, Lena, when I saw you on that stretcher, when the paramedic told me you might not make it, you were scared. I understand. But Victor, fear isn't the same as love, and being scared of losing something isn't the same as appreciating it when you have it. I do appreciate you. I love you. Do you? Lena met his gaze steadily. Because love isn't just words, Victor. It's actions. It's showing up. It's answering your phone when your pregnant wife calls. It's remembering that she exists even when you're in an important meeting. And by those measures, I'm not sure you know what love is. The words seemed to physically wound him. Victor's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this. I don't know if you can. Lena, I mean it. She felt tears building but refused to let them fall. You left me outside to freeze, Victor. You prioritized business over my safety, over our baby's safety. How do I trust you after that? How do I believe that you won't do it again? Because I swear to you, I won't. I swear. You swore to love and cherish me when we got married. You swore you'd take care of me. And look where we are. Lena gestured around the hospital room. Your promises don't mean anything if you can't keep them. Victor stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing harsh. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. You want the truth? The ugly, unfiltered truth? Yes. I was drinking. Inside that mansion, while you were outside freezing, I was drinking expensive whiskey and making deals and pretending to give a damn about territory agreements. And when my phone rang, I ignored it. Not because I didn't hear it, not because I was too busy, but because answering it would have meant explaining to those men that my pregnant wife needed me. It would have meant looking weak, looking like I couldn't control my personal life. He turned to face her, and the self-loathing in his expression was stark. So I let it ring. I let you call, and I sat there, drinking, laughing at jokes I didn't find funny, being Victor Romano, the man everyone fears and respects. And I told myself you'd understand, that you always understood. Lena felt something break inside her chest, because this was worse than forgetting. This was choosing, actively, consciously choosing his image over her well-being. "Get out," she whispered. "Lena, get out!" The words came out as a sob. I can't look at you right now. I can't hear your voice. I can't." She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the tears, the rage, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. "Please, don't shut me out. Let me—" "You shut me out!" Lena's voice cracked. "You shut me out when you silenced your phone." Victor stood frozen, his face pale. I know you didn't mean to. That's almost worse, because it means I'm so far down your list of priorities that you can forget about me completely without even trying." Lena reached for the call button. "I want you to leave. Now. Before I say something I can't take back." "Lena, please." The nurse appeared in the doorway. "Is everything all right?" "No." Lena kept her eyes on Victor, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "My husband was just leaving. Weren't you, Victor?" He looked like he wanted to argue, looked like he wanted to stay and fight and somehow make this right. But whatever he saw on her face must have convinced him that pushing now would only make things worse. He nodded slowly, defeated. "I'll be in the waiting room. If you need anything—" "I won't need you." The words were cruel, designed to hurt, and from the way Victor's face crumpled, they hit their mark. "That's the point." He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Lena finally let herself fall apart. Great, heaving sob that shook her whole body, that made the baby kick frantically in response, that brought the nurse rushing to her side with soothing words and tissues. "Mrs. Romano, you need to calm down. The stress isn't good for the baby." I know, I'm sorry." Lena tried to breathe through the tears, tried to find some measure of control. I can't believe he actually admitted it, that he heard my calls and chose not to answer." The nurse's expression softened with understanding. Men can be incredibly stupid sometimes, especially when they're trying to prove something to other men. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't, but it does make it human. She checked Lena's monitors, adjusting something on the IV. "Your blood pressure is elevated. I'm going to give you something to help you relax. And I'm going to strongly suggest that you avoid stressful conversations for the next few days." "Doctor's orders." Lena nodded, too exhausted to argue. The medication hit her system quickly, making her thoughts fuzzy and her eyelids heavy. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the steady beep of her baby's heartbeat and the image of Victor's face when she'd told him to leave. She'd hurt him. She knew she'd hurt him. But he'd hurt her first, hurt her deeper. And she wasn't ready to forgive that. Wasn't sure she'd ever be ready. In the waiting room, Victor sat with his head in his hands, replaying the conversation over and over. Every word Lena had said was a mirror held up to his failures. Every accusation was true. He had forgotten her. He had prioritized his image over her safety. He had sat in that mansion drinking whiskey while she collapsed outside. And the worst part? He'd known. On some level, he'd known she was waiting, known it was taking too long, known he should check his phone, but he'd chosen not to, chosen the easy path of ignorance over the harder path of responsibility. His phone buzzed. Marco calling again. Victor sent it to voicemail. Whatever the man wanted could wait. Everything could wait. Because sitting here, knowing his wife hated him, knowing his marriage might be over before his child was even born, that was a consequence he couldn't negotiate his way out of. "Mr. Romano?" Dr. Chen approached, his expression professional but concerned. "I heard there was an incident in your wife's room. She asked me to leave. Can you blame her?" "No." Victor laughed bitterly. "No, I can't blame her at all. She's absolutely right to hate me." "I don't think she hates you. I think she's hurt, scared, trying to protect herself and her baby." Dr. Chen sat down beside him. Mr. Romano, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of marriages tested by medical crises. Some survive, some don't. The ones that survive? They're built on honesty, communication, and the willingness to actually change, not just promise to change. How do I prove I've changed when she won't even look at me? You start by giving her space, by respecting her boundaries, by showing up even when she pushes you away. Dr. Chen leaned back in his chair. And you start by being honest with yourself about why you made the choices you made. Because until you understand that, you can't fix it. But Victor sat with that for a long moment. Why had he silenced his phone? Why had he ignored Lena's calls? The easy answer was that he'd been in a meeting, that he'd lost track of time, that he hadn't realized how serious it was. But the truth was darker. The truth was that answering Lena's calls would have meant acknowledging that his wife needed him, would have meant showing vulnerability in front of men who respected strength, would have meant choosing her over the empire he'd built, the reputation he'd cultivated, the identity he'd constructed as Victor Romano, the untouchable. And he'd decided she wasn't worth that cost. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd weighed Lena against his pride and found her wanting. He'd measured her worth against his image and decided the image mattered more. "I'm a monster," he whispered. "No," Dr. Chen's voice was firm. "You're a man who made a terrible mistake. What happens next, whether you become a monster or something better, that's up to you. What if she won't give me the chance?" Then you respect that decision. You don't pressure her. You don't manipulate her. You don't use your money or power or connections to force your way back into her life. The doctor stood. You love her enough to let her go if that's what she needs, even if it destroys you. After Dr. Chen left, Victor sat alone in the waiting room and faced a truth he'd been avoiding for years. He'd built an empire on fear and respect and carefully cultivated power. He'd become the kind of man people listened to, obeyed, feared. He'd convinced himself that success in business meant success in life. But sitting here, with his marriage crumbling and his wife refusing to see him, Victor realized he'd gotten it exactly backward. Because all the money and power and respect in the world meant nothing if you lost the people who actually mattered. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Elena Castellano, Marco's wife. "Heard what happened. Is Lena okay?" Victor stared at the message, at this woman he barely knew showing more concern for his wife than he had. He typed back, "Stable. Baby too. But she won't see me." The response came quickly. "Good for her. You left her outside to freeze. She's smart to keep her distance." Even Marco's wife thought he was scum. Victor almost laughed. Almost. Another text from Elena. "But if you want to fix this, actually fix it, you need to do more than apologize. You need to become a different man. The question is, are you capable of that?" Victor looked at those words for a long time. Was he capable of changing, of becoming the kind of man who put his wife first, who didn't measure her worth against his reputation, who actually kept his promises? He didn't know. But for the first time in his life, he wanted to find out. Not because he was scared of losing Lena, though he was. Not because he felt guilty, though the guilt was crushing him. But because looking at himself through her eyes, through the lens of his choices last night, he didn't like what he saw. He didn't like the man who could forget his pregnant wife was waiting in the cold. Didn't like the man who valued pride over compassion. Didn't like the man who'd built everything on a foundation of fear instead of love. Victor stood, shoving his phone in his pocket. He couldn't see Lena, couldn't talk to her, couldn't hold her, couldn't beg for forgiveness she wasn't ready to give. But he could do something else. He could start making different choices. He called his assistant. "Cancel everything for the next week. Meetings, calls, all of it." "Sir, you have the Henderson deal closing on." "I don't care. Cancel it. Reschedule it. I don't care if we lose the deal. Cancel everything." There was a pause. "Is everything all right, Mr. Romano?" "No, but it's going to be. One way or another, it's going to be." He ended the call and walked back to Lena's room. Didn't go in. Just stood outside the door close enough to hear the monitor beeping, to know she was alive, to feel connected to her, even if she didn't want him there. The nurse came out, saw him standing there. "She's asleep. The medication I gave her will keep her out for a few hours." "I know, I needed to be close, even if she doesn't know I'm here." The nurse's expression softened. You really hurt her, you know. I know. It's going to take more than standing outside her door to fix this. I know that too. Victor looked at the closed door, at the woman he'd failed sleeping beyond it. But I have to start somewhere, and right now this is all she'll let me do. The nurse nodded and walked away, leaving Victor alone in the hallway with his thoughts and his regrets and his desperate, fragile hope that maybe, somehow, he could find a way back to the woman who'd trusted him with her heart. The woman he'd let down in the worst way possible. The woman he loved more than anything in his carefully constructed empire. And as the hospital hummed with life around him, as monitors beeped and intercoms called and the world kept turning, Victor Romano made a promise. Not to Lena, because she wasn't ready to hear his promises, but to himself. He would change. He would become better. He would earn back the trust he'd shattered, even if it took the rest of his life. Because the alternative, a life without Lena, without his child, without the family he'd almost destroyed, was unbearable. The door to her room remained closed. But Victor stayed, kept his vigil, proved through action instead of words that this time he wasn't leaving. This time he would be the man she deserved, even if she never believed it, even if she never forgave him, even if all he had left was the chance to stand outside her door and protect her from a distance. It was more than he deserved, and less than he'd do anything, everything, to reclaim. 3 days passed in careful silence. Victor kept his distance as Dr. Chen had advised, but he never left the hospital. He slept in the waiting room when exhaustion overwhelmed him, ate vending machine food he barely tasted, and stood outside Lena's door during the hours when he knew she was awake, listening to the sound of her voice when nurses came to check on her. He didn't try to see her, didn't send flowers or gifts or any of the empty gestures he would have relied on before, because he was learning, slowly and painfully, that action spoke louder than apologies. That showing up meant nothing if he didn't also give her the space she'd asked for. On the 4th day, things changed. Victor was in his usual spot in the waiting room, laptop open but untouched, when Dr. Chen approached with an expression that made his heart stop. Is she okay? The baby? They're both stable. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Dr. Chen sat down. We've managed to stop the premature labor completely. Your wife's temperature is normal. Her blood pressure is improving, and the baby's heart rate has been consistently strong for 72 hours. Relief flooded through Victor so intensely he felt dizzy. So they're going to be okay? If things continue as they are, yes. We'd like to keep Mrs. Romano here for another few days for observation, but the crisis has passed. Dr. Chen paused. However, there's something else we need to discuss. Your wife has been asking questions about what happens after she's discharged. About living arrangements. Victor's chest tightened. What kind of questions? She wants to know if she can go to her sister's house in Boston instead of home with you. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Boston. 300 miles away. Lena was planning to leave him, to take their baby and disappear into a life that didn't include him. Did you tell her she could? I told her it's not medically advisable. The stress of travel, being away from her primary care team with only a month until her due date, it's risky. Dr. Chen's expression was sympathetic. But Mr. Romano, I can't force her to stay somewhere she doesn't feel safe. She doesn't feel safe with me. Victor said it as a statement, not a question, because of course she didn't. Why would she feel safe with the man who'd nearly killed her through negligence? She feels betrayed. That's different from unsafe, but the emotional distinction might not matter much right now. The doctor stood. I think you two need to talk, really talk, not through closed doors or nurses acting as intermediaries. But I can't make her see you if she's not ready. After Dr. Chen left, Victor sat staring at nothing, his mind racing. Lena was planning to leave, to go to Boston, to her sister's house, to anywhere that wasn't near him. And he couldn't blame her, wouldn't blame her. But the thought of losing her, of their child growing up 300 miles away, of becoming the kind of father who saw his kid on weekends and holidays, he couldn't accept that. Wouldn't accept that. But forcing his way into her room, demanding she listen to him, that wasn't the answer either. That was the old Victor, the man who thought power and control could solve everything. The man who'd created this mess in the first place. So instead, Victor did something he'd never done before. He wrote a letter. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter, written by hand on hospital stationery because he had nothing else. His handwriting was terrible. He'd spent years typing instead of writing, but he pressed on, crossing out mistakes, starting over when necessary. It took him 2 hours to get it right. 2 hours of pouring everything he couldn't say out loud onto paper. When he was done, his hand was cramping and the letter was 3 pages long, but it was honest. Brutally, painfully honest in ways he'd never been before. He folded it carefully and gave it to the nurse. "Can you give this to my wife? You don't have to tell her it's from me. Just make sure she gets it when she's alone, when she has time to read it without feeling pressured." The nurse took the letter, studied his face. "You really love her, don't you?" "More than I knew how to show. I'm trying to learn." "Then I hope she reads it. I hope she hears what you're trying to say." The nurse tucked the letter into her pocket. "But Mr. Romano, you should know, love isn't always enough. Sometimes the damage is too deep." "I know, but I have to try." In her room, Lena was staring out the window when the nurse came in for the evening check. The view wasn't much, just the parking lot and the city skyline beyond, but it was better than looking at the 4 walls that had become her prison for the past 4 days. "How are you feeling tonight, Mrs. Romano?" Restless, tired of being in bed, worried about the baby. Lena placed a hand on her belly. The baby had been active today, kicking and shifting like it was running out of room, which, at 8 months, it probably was. "Dr. Chen said I might be able to go home soon. If your numbers stay stable, yes." The nurse checked the monitors, made notes on her chart. "Mrs. Romano, I have something for you. A letter." She pulled the folded pages from her pocket. "I was asked not to say who it's from, but I think you can probably guess." Lena stared at the letter like it might bite her. "Victor, you don't have to read it if you don't want to. I can throw it away right now." Part of Lena wanted to say yes, to refuse to read whatever excuses or promises Victor had written, but another part, the part that had loved him enough to marry him, to carry his child, to believe in the future they were supposed to build together, that part was curious. "I'll read it," she said quietly, "but I'm not making any promises about how I'll respond." "No one's asking you to." The nurse handed her the letter and left, closing the door softly behind her. Lena unfolded the pages with shaking hands. Victor's handwriting was messy, words crossed out and rewritten, but somehow that made it more real, more human, like he'd struggled to find the right words just as much as she was struggling to forgive him. She began to read. "Lena, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you should read this. But Dr. Chen said you were asking about going to Boston, and I realized that if I don't say what I need to say now, I might never get another chance. I've been trying to figure out what to tell you, how to explain why I did what I did. I've come up with 100 different excuses. I lost track of time. I didn't realize how cold it was. I thought you were safe in the car. But they're all lies. Or at least they're not the whole truth. The whole truth is this. I heard your calls. I saw your messages. And I made a choice not to answer because answering would have meant admitting to the men in that room that my wife needed me. It would have meant looking weak, looking like I couldn't control my personal life. And I valued their respect more than your safety. I'm writing that down because I need you to know I understand what I did. I'm not confused about it. I'm not making excuses. I chose my pride over your well-being, and our baby almost died because of it. That's the truth. The ugly, unforgivable truth. You asked me when was the last time I put you first. I've been thinking about that question for 4 days. And the answer is, I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe not since we got married and I started treating you like another part of my empire instead of the woman I fell in love with. I remember the first time I saw you. You were teaching at that elementary school, reading to a classroom full of 3rd graders. You had paint on your sleeve and chalk in your hair, and you were so focused on making those kids understand fractions that you didn't even notice me standing in the doorway. I asked the principal who you were, and she said, "That's Miss Russo, best teacher we've got. The kids would follow her anywhere." I fell in love with you that day, not because you were beautiful, though you were. Not because you impressed me, though you did, but because you were real. Because you cared about something bigger than yourself. Because in a world full of people trying to use me or fear me or manipulate me, you didn't even know who I was. When I asked you out, you said no. Do you remember that? You said you didn't date men in expensive suits who showed up unannounced. So I came back the next week in jeans and a t-shirt, and I asked if that was better. You laughed. And I thought, this is it. This is the woman I want to spend my life with. I don't know when I stopped being that man. The man who wore jeans to impress you. The man who would have done anything to make you laugh. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that being Victor Romano, feared businessman, meant nothing if I wasn't also being the man you fell in love with. I can't change what I did. I can't take back leaving you in the cold. I can't undo the fear you felt, the pain you went through, the betrayal you're feeling now. But I can promise you this. I'm ending my relationship with Sofia Castellano. I know you heard her voice when you called. I know what you must think, and you're right to think it. I was unfaithful. Not physically, I never touched her. But emotionally, I checked out of our marriage months ago. I let her flirt with me, let her text me, let her think there was something between us because it felt good to be wanted without having to work for it. That ends today. I'm also stepping back from some of my business obligations. Not all of them. I'm not naive enough to think I can just walk away from my responsibilities. But the late-night meetings, the constant calls, the obsessive focus on building an empire at the expense of everything else, that has to change. Because you were right. I built everything on a foundation of fear instead of love. And what good is an empire if I lose my family in the process? I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to come home to me or to give me another chance or to pretend like this didn't happen. I'm just asking you to let me prove, through actions, not words, that I can be better. If you want to go to Boston, I'll respect that. I'll make sure you have everything you need, that you're safe, that the baby has the best medical care available. I won't fight you. I won't try to control you. Because controlling you would just prove I haven't learned anything. But if there's any part of you that thinks we might be able to fix this, if there's any chance you might let me try to be the husband you deserve and the father our child needs, then I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes. I love you, Lena. I've loved you since the moment I saw you with chalk in your hair. I'll love you if you forgive me. I'll love you if you don't. I'll love you from 300 miles away if that's what you need. But I'm praying you'll let me love you up close. Let me prove that I can change. Let me show you that the man you married is still in here somewhere, buried under years of arrogance and pride and putting the wrong things first. Give me a chance. That's all I'm asking. One chance to show you I can be better. Yours, Victor. Lena read the letter twice, then a third time. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the words, but she kept reading, kept absorbing what Victor had written. He'd admitted everything. The calls he'd ignored, the emotional affair, the choice he'd made to value pride over her safety. He wasn't making excuses, wasn't trying to minimize what he'd done. He was owning it, fully and completely. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it would have been easier to stay angry at a man who was making excuses. Easier to hate someone who was blaming her for his mistakes or minimizing the damage he'd caused. But Victor had done none of those things. He'd looked at himself clearly and honestly, and he'd hated what he saw. Lena could feel that in every word, in every crossed-out phrase, in the shaky handwriting that showed just how hard this had been for him to write. The question was, did it matter? Did it matter that he was sorry if he'd already broken her trust so completely? Did it matter that he promised to change if she couldn't believe his promises anymore? Did it matter that he loved her if his love hadn't been enough to make him check his phone? Lena pressed the letter to her chest, feeling the baby kick beneath it. Their baby. The child they'd made together, planned for together, prepared for together. The baby who deserved two parents who loved each other, not a broken home and a father who only saw them on weekends. But their baby also deserved parents who respected each other, who showed up for each other, who didn't leave each other standing in the cold because a business meeting ran long. "What should I do, Ig?" she whispered to her belly. "Tell me what I should do." The baby kicked again, hard enough to make her wince. No answers there. Just movement, life, a reminder that in less than a month she'd be responsible for another human being, and whatever decision she made now would shape that child's entire life. The door opened and the nurse poked her head in. "Mrs. Romano, I have good news. Dr. Chen says if your vitals stay stable through tonight, you can be discharged tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. The word felt loaded with meaning. Tomorrow she could leave this hospital, could go home, or to Boston, or anywhere else she wanted. Tomorrow, she'd have to make a choice. Thank you, Lena managed. After the nurse left, Lena folded the letter carefully and placed it on the bedside table. She couldn't think about this now, couldn't process everything Victor had said, everything he was asking for. Her mind was too full, her heart too confused, her body too exhausted. But as she closed her eyes trying to sleep, Lena found herself remembering something Victor had written about the first time he saw her, with chalk in her hair and paint on her sleeve. She remembered that day too. Remembered the tall, handsome man in the expensive suit standing in her classroom doorway. Remembered thinking he was probably a parent, probably there to complain about something. She'd had no idea he was Victor Romano, had no idea about his reputation, his power, his empire. She'd just seen a man who looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the world. When had that stopped? When had his eyes started sliding past her to his phone, to his associates, to the next deal and the next meeting and the endless building of something bigger? Lena didn't have the answer, but lying there in the dark, listening to her baby's heartbeat on the monitor, she realized something. She missed that man. The one in the expensive suit who'd come back in jeans just to make her smile. The one who'd courted her with silly jokes and terrible puns and genuine interest in her day. She missed her husband, the real version of him, not the empire builder who'd forgotten she existed. The question was, did that version still exist? Or had Victor Romano, businessman and boss, consumed the Victor who'd fallen in love with a teacher with chalk in her hair? And more importantly, was she willing to risk finding out? In the waiting room, Victor stared at his phone, at the message from Sofia Castellano. We need to talk. Marco says you're cutting ties. That's not fair, Victor. We have something real. His finger hovered over the delete button. In the past, he might have responded, might have let her down gently, might have left the door open for future possibilities, might have told himself that keeping options open was just smart business. But looking at that message now, after everything that had happened, Victor felt nothing but disgust. Disgust at Sofia for pursuing a married man, disgust at himself for allowing it, disgust at the version of himself who'd thought emotional infidelity was somehow better than physical infidelity. He deleted the message without responding. Then he blocked her number. Then, because simply blocking her wasn't enough, he called Marco. Romano, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I need you to keep Sofia away from me. No more joint meetings, no more business dinners, no more opportunities for her to think there's something between us. It ends today. Marco was quiet for a moment. She's my niece, Victor. I can't control who she talks to. Then I'll make it clear to her myself. But I'm telling you first, as a courtesy. Whatever she thinks we had, it's over. It never really started. And I'm not interested in continuing any kind of relationship with her, business or otherwise. This about your wife? This is about being the kind of man who deserves my wife. Which means ending all the bullshit I've been telling myself was harmless. Fair enough. Marco's tone shifted, became almost approving. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Lena's a good woman, better than you deserve, honestly. I know. That's why I'm trying to change. Then I'll talk to Sofia, make it clear she needs to back off. But Victor? Cutting ties with her is the easy part. Actually becoming a different man? That's going to take more than deleting a phone number. I know that too. After the call ended, Victor felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't relief, not exactly. It was more like the first step of a very long journey. Like he'd finally pointed himself in the right direction even if the destination was still miles away. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his assistant. Henderson deal fell through. They went with Morrison instead, loss of approximately $4.2 million. A week ago, that message would have sent Victor into a rage. Would have had him on the phone immediately, trying to salvage the deal, trying to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Would have consumed his attention completely. Now, he just stared at it. $4.2 million. A significant loss. But not as significant as what he'd almost lost 4 nights ago on the frozen pavement outside Marco's estate. He typed back. Understood. Let it go. Focus on the accounts we have, not the ones we lost. Then he turned off his phone and put it in his pocket. Because money could be made again. Deals could be rebuilt. But if Lena walked away, if she took their baby to Boston and never came back, that loss would be permanent. And no amount of business success could fill that void. The night stretched on. Victor dozed fitfully in the waiting room chair, his dreams full of Lena's face and the sound of monitors flatlining and the cold that had nearly claimed everything that mattered. He woke multiple times, heart pounding, checking the clock to see how many hours remained until morning, until Lena made her decision, until he found out if he'd get a chance to prove himself or if he'd spend the rest of his life watching his family from a distance. When dawn finally broke, painting the hospital windows in shades of pink and gold, Victor stood and walked to Lena's room. He didn't go in, just stood outside, close enough to hear movement, to know she was awake, to be near her, even if she didn't want him there. Inside, Lena was sitting up in bed, Victor's letter in her hands, reading it one more time. The nurse had said she could be discharged this morning. Dr. Chen would be by within the hour to do final checks and sign the paperwork. Then she'd have to decide, home or Boston, Victor or separation, hope or self-preservation. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby's reassuring movements. "What do you think?" she whispered. "Should we give your father another chance?" The baby kicked, hard and insistent. Lena smiled despite herself. "That's not really an answer, you know. But maybe it was. Because this baby deserved a father, deserved to know the man who'd created them, who'd promised to love them, who'd made terrible mistakes but was trying to do better. And maybe Lena deserved the chance to see if the man she'd fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. If the Victor who'd worn jeans to impress her could coexist with Victor Romano, businessman. She didn't know. Couldn't know. But as she sat there, holding the letter that had taken her husband 2 hours and all his courage to write, Lena realized something. She wanted to find out, not knowing whether she'd choose healing or distance, whether she'd give him the chance he was begging for, or walk away forever. That uncertainty was what made him stand outside her door at 7 in the morning, close enough to be present, but far enough to respect her boundaries. When Dr. Chen arrived to do the final examination, Victor forced himself to walk back to the waiting room, to give Lena privacy, to not hover like some desperate ghost haunting the hallways. The waiting room had become his home over the past 5 days. He knew every stain on the carpet, every flicker in the fluorescent lights, every uncomfortable angle of the plastic chairs. 20 minutes later, the nurse found him. "Mrs. Romano is being discharged. She's asked to see you." Victor's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. "She wants to see me?" "She does. But Mr. Romano, whatever she has to say, please let her say it. Don't interrupt. Don't try to fix it before you've heard it. Just listen." He nodded, not trusting his voice, followed the nurse down the hallway that he'd walked 100 times, to the door he'd stood outside for hours, to the woman who held his entire future in her hands. Lena was dressed in her own clothes now, sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked better, color back in her cheeks, the exhaustion less pronounced around her eyes. But there was something else there too, a guardedness, a careful distance that made Victor's chest ache. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi." Lena's hands were folded in her lap, the letter he'd written visible on the bedside table. "Dr. Chen says I can go home." "That's good. That's really good. I read your letter." She looked up at him finally, and Victor saw everything in her eyes, pain, confusion, a desperate wanting to believe mixed with the terror of being hurt again. Multiple times. "Lena, let me talk first, please." Her voice was steady but soft. "I need to say this before I lose my courage." Victor nodded, moving to lean against the wall because his legs felt unsteady. "Okay. When I woke up in this hospital, when I realized what had happened, my first thought wasn't about myself. It was about the baby, about whether I'd lost our child because I was stupid enough to stand outside in the cold waiting for a man who'd forgotten I existed." She placed a hand on her belly. "And when the nurse told me the baby was okay, the relief was so intense I couldn't breathe. But right after that relief came something else. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage at you for putting us in that position." Victor wanted to interrupt, to apologize again, but he forced himself to stay silent, to listen like the nurse had told him to. "I've spent 5 days trying to decide what to do, whether to go to Boston like I told Dr. Chen I wanted to, whether to file for divorce, whether to raise this baby alone rather than tie myself to a man who valued his reputation more than my life." Lena's voice wavered but didn't break. And I kept coming back to one question. Why did I marry you? The question hung in the air between them. Victor didn't answer because he sensed she wasn't done. I married you because you made me feel seen. Because in a world where I was just another elementary school teacher, just another face in the crowd, you looked at me like I was extraordinary. You remembered little things, how I took my coffee, what books I was reading, the names of my students. You made me feel like I mattered. You do matter. I'm not finished. Lena's voice was firmer now. Somewhere in the past 2 years, that changed. I stopped mattering. Or maybe I still mattered, but I mattered less than your meetings, your deals, your empire. I became something to be managed rather than someone to be loved. And I let it happen. I let myself become invisible because I told myself that's what being a good wife meant. Supporting your career, not complaining when you were late. Understanding when business came first. She stood slowly, one hand braced on the bed for support. Victor instinctively moved to help her, but she held up a hand to stop him. But that night, standing outside in the cold, calling you over and over, Victor, I finally understood something. I wasn't being a good wife. I was being a doormat. And you weren't being a good husband. You were being a man who'd forgotten that power and money mean nothing if you lose the people you love in the process of gaining them. I know. Lena, I know, and Your letter said you're going to change, that you're ending things with Sophia, that you're stepping back from some of your business obligations, that you want to prove you can be better. Lena met his eyes directly. But Victor, I don't need you to be better. I need you to be present. I need you to remember that when I call, it's not an interruption. It's your wife needing you. I need you to choose me, actively and consciously, every single day. Not just when there's a crisis, not just when you're scared of losing me, every day. I can do that. I will do that. Can you? The question was gentle but devastating. Because I need you to really think about what you're promising. I need you to understand that changing isn't just about ending an emotional affair or canceling a few meetings. It's about fundamentally restructuring how you see the world, how you see us, how you see yourself. Victor pushed off the wall, took a step closer, but stopped when he saw Lena tense. You're right, about all of it. I've spent 5 days thinking about nothing except how badly I failed you, how close I came to losing everything that actually matters. And I realized something. What? That I've been living my life like success in business equals success in life. Like if I could just build a big enough empire, if I could just earn enough respect and fear and power, then everything else would fall into place. But it doesn't work that way, because you can have all the money and power in the world and still be completely alone. Still be the kind of man who leaves his pregnant wife outside to freeze. Lena's expression softened slightly, but she didn't speak. I'm not going to pretend I know how to fix this, Victor continued. I'm not going to promise I'll be perfect, because we both know that's a lie. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to forget things. I'm probably going to check my phone at dinner sometimes without thinking about it. But Lena, I swear to you, I will never, ever prioritize anything over you and our baby ever again. Not a meeting, not a deal, not my pride or my reputation or any of the things I used to think defined me. Words are easy, Victor. It's the actions that matter. Then let me show you. He took another step closer, close enough now that he could see the tears gathering in her eyes. Don't go to Boston. Come home. Let me prove that I can be the man you need. And if I fail, if I fall back into old patterns, if I forget even once that you're the most important thing in my life, then you can leave. No arguments, no attempts to stop you. I'll help you pack. I'll sign whatever papers you want. But please, Lena, give me one chance to get this right. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Lena studied his face like she was searching for something. Truth, sincerity, some sign that he meant what he was saying. Victor let her look, kept his expression open, let her see all of his desperation and hope and terrified love. One chance, she said finally. But Victor, I need you to understand what that means. One chance doesn't mean I trust you again immediately. It doesn't mean we go back to how things were before. It means I'm willing to see if you can actually change, if you can become the man you're promising to be. I understand. And I need you to do something for me, something that's going to be hard. Anything. I need you to see a therapist, someone who can help you understand why you make the choices you make, why you valued your pride over my safety, why you let an emotional affair develop when you had a wife at home who loved you. Lena's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Because I can forgive you, Victor. Eventually, I think I can forgive you. But I can't forget. And I can't trust that this won't happen again unless you actually do the work to understand yourself. The request hit Victor like a physical blow. Therapy. Sitting in a room with a stranger, talking about his feelings, examining his choices. Everything in him wanted to refuse, to say he could figure this out on his own, to maintain the armor he'd spent years building. But looking at Lena, at the woman who was offering him a chance he didn't deserve, Victor realized that armor was exactly the problem. That his refusal to be vulnerable, to examine himself, to admit weakness, that was what had brought them here. Okay, he said, I'll find a therapist. I'll go as often as they recommend. I'll do the work. And I need couples therapy too. Both of us, together, learning how to communicate better, how to rebuild trust, how to be partners instead of strangers sharing a house. Yes, whatever you need, whatever it takes. Lena nodded slowly, then moved toward him. Not all the way. She stopped a few feet short, maintaining distance. But it was closer than she'd been since she woke up, closer than Victor had dared to hope. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared of believing you, scared of getting hurt again, scared that I'm making a mistake by giving you this chance. I'm scared too. Victor's voice was rough with emotion. I'm terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm not capable of being the man you need, that I'm going to let you down again and lose you forever. Then I guess we're both taking a risk. Yeah, I guess we are. Lena looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring she was still wearing despite everything. I want to go home, Victor. Not to Boston, not to my sisters. Home, to our house, to the nursery we painted together, to the life we were supposed to build. Relief crashed over Victor so intensely he thought his knees might buckle. Thank you. Lena, thank you. But we're not sharing a bedroom. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. You can have the guest room, and we're going to have rules, boundaries, things that need to be in place for me to feel safe. Whatever you need. I'll sleep on the couch if that's what you want. The guest room is fine. Lena finally met his eyes again. And Victor, the first time you prioritize a meeting over me, the first time you silence your phone when I'm trying to reach you, the first time you make me feel invisible again, I'm gone. No second chances, no explanations. I'm taking the baby and I'm leaving, and you won't stop me. Do you understand? I understand. Then let's go home. The drive home was quiet. Victor had wanted to carry Lena's bag, to help her into the car, to hover and fuss, and show her how much he cared. But he forced himself to hold back, to let her maintain her independence, to remember that smothering her with attention wasn't the same as respecting her. When they pulled into the driveway of the house they'd bought together a year ago, the house they'd chosen because it had a yard for kids and a neighborhood with good schools, Lena stared at it like she was seeing it for the first time. I forgot how much I loved this house, she said softly. So did I. Victor turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. Lena, before we go in, I need to tell you something. I've already started making changes. I fired my assistant who was always scheduling meetings during dinner. I told Marco I'm stepping back from the expansion into the docks. I sold my stake in 3 of the businesses that were taking up the most time. And I called a therapist. I have an appointment on Thursday. Lena turned to look at him, surprise evident on her face. You did all that in 5 days? I did it in 2 days. The other 3 I just spent standing outside your hospital room, hoping you'd give me a chance to tell you about it. Something shifted in Lena's expression. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the first small seed of belief. You really meant what you said in the letter, about changing. Every word. I'm done building an empire at the expense of my family. I'm done being the kind of man who forgets his wife exists. I'm done with all of it. Victor reached across the car, then stopped, his hand hovering between them. Can I hold your hand? Just for a moment? Lena hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. The touch was electric, the first time they'd made contact since before that terrible night. Victor squeezed gently, feeling the warmth of her skin, the reality of her presence. I love you, he said. I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it. But I'm going to learn. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be the husband you deserve and the father our baby needs." "I want to believe you," Lena whispered. "Then believe me. Watch me. Hold me accountable. And if I fail, if I fall back into old patterns, call me on it. Don't let me get away with anything, because I need you to be honest with me, even when the truth is hard to hear." Lena nodded, then slowly withdrew her hand. "Let's go inside. I'm exhausted and this baby is doing gymnastics." Over the next 3 weeks, Victor learned what it actually meant to change. It meant going to therapy twice a week and talking about his childhood, his relationship with his father, the beliefs he'd internalized about power and success, and what it meant to be a man. It meant sitting in couples therapy with Lena, listening to her express hurt and anger he'd never fully understood, and not getting defensive when she told him things he didn't want to hear. It meant coming home for dinner every night. Not just coming home, but actually being present. Phones off, laptop closed, giving Lena and their unborn baby his full attention. It meant learning to cook, because Lena was too pregnant to stand at the stove for long. It meant going to every doctor's appointment and actually listening when Dr. Morrison talked about Lena's blood pressure and the baby's position. It meant accepting that some days Lena didn't want to talk to him. That some days she looked at him with wariness instead of love. That forgiveness wasn't a switch she could flip, but a journey they were walking together, one painful step at a time. 3 weeks after Lena came home from the hospital, Victor came downstairs to find her in the nursery. She was sitting in the rocking chair they'd bought together, one hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. "Lena, what's wrong? Is it the baby?" "The baby's fine. She gestured around the room at the pale yellow walls they'd painted, the crib Victor had assembled, the stuffed animals and tiny clothes waiting for the child they'd created. "I was so angry at you that I almost gave up all of this. Almost took our baby to Boston and raised them alone. And I realized today how close I came to making a terrible mistake." Victor crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside the rocking chair. "You weren't making a mistake. You were protecting yourself and the baby. That's not wrong. But I would have been taking them away from their father, from you. And yes, you screwed up massively. Yes, you almost got us both killed through negligence. But Victor, you've been different these past 3 weeks. You've been present. You've been trying. And our baby deserves to grow up with that version of you. I'm trying to make sure that version is the only version they ever know." Victor placed his hand over hers, feeling the baby kick beneath their joined palms. "I never want our child to know the man who left you in the cold. I only want them to know the man who learned from that mistake." Lena covered his hand with her other one, creating a connection between all 3 of them. "I'm starting to trust you again. It's slow. It's hard. There are still moments when you reach for your phone and I tense up, waiting to see if you'll ignore me. But it's getting better. That's all I can ask for. Time and the chance to keep proving myself." Dr. Morrison said the baby could come any day now. "Are you ready to be a father?" Victor looked up at her, this woman he'd almost lost, this woman who was giving him a chance he didn't deserve. "I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm probably going to mess it up 100 different ways. But Lena, I'm ready to try. I'm ready to be the father I never had, the kind who shows up, who's present, who loves unconditionally." "Then we're going to figure this out together." Lena leaned down and kissed his forehead, the first kiss she'd initiated since the hospital. It was gentle, brief, but it held more meaning than 1,000 passionate embraces. It held hope. 2 days later, at 3 a.m, Lena shook Victor awake. "It's time. The contractions are 5 minutes apart." The drive to the hospital was nothing like the drive 5 weeks ago when she'd been unconscious on a stretcher. This time, Lena was awake and alert, breathing through contractions while Victor held her hand and tried to remember everything they'd learned in the childbirth class he'd insisted on attending. "You're doing great," he said as another contraction hit. "Just breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth." "I know how to breathe, Victor." But Lena was smiling despite the pain. "I'm the one who made you practice this every night for a week. And I'm grateful for it because otherwise I'd be panicking right now." "You are panicking right now. Your hand is shaking." "Okay, fine, I'm panicking, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of Lena squeezing Victor's hand hard enough to leave marks. of breathing exercises and ice chips and doctors checking progress. 14 hours of Victor watching the strongest person he'd ever known endure unimaginable pain to bring their child into the world. And through all of it, he stayed. Didn't check his phone, didn't step out to make calls, didn't let anything distract him from the woman he loved and the miracle they were creating together. When their daughter finally arrived at 5:47 p.m., tiny and perfect and screaming her displeasure at the world, Victor felt something crack open in his chest. This was his child, his daughter, the most precious thing he would ever help create. "She's beautiful," he whispered as the nurse placed the baby in Lena's arms. "She's absolutely perfect." "She has your eyes," Lena said, tears streaming down her face. "Look at her, Victor. Look at what we made." Victor sat on the edge of the hospital bed, wrapping his arms around both of them, his wife and his daughter. His entire world reduced to this moment, this room, these two people who needed him to be better than he'd ever been before. "What should we name her?" Lena asked. They'd discussed names for months but never settled on one. Victor had suggested family names, traditional names, names that carried weight in history. But looking at his daughter now, at her tiny fists and her dark hair, and the way she'd already stopped crying and was looking around with curious eyes, only one name felt right. "Hope," he said. "I want to call her Hope, because she represents everything good that almost didn't happen, because she's the reason I'm becoming a better man, because looking at her, I have hope that we're going to be okay, that our family is going to survive and thrive and be everything it should be." Lena looked up at him, fresh tears in her eyes. "Hope Romano. It's perfect." 3 months later, Victor sat in his home office on a Saturday afternoon, bouncing Hope on his knee while Lena napped upstairs. The business documents in front of him were important, a new contract that needed review. But they could wait. Right now, his daughter was making the little cooing sounds that never failed to melt his heart. And that was infinitely more important than any deal. His phone rang. Marco's name on the screen. Victor hesitated, then answered. "Marco, what can I do for you?" "Just checking in. Haven't heard from you much lately. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect. I'm spending time with my family, focusing on what matters." There was a pause. "Romano, I've known you for 15 years. Never thought I'd hear you say that. Fatherhood really changed you, huh?" Fatherhood. Almost losing everything. Realizing that empires don't keep you warm at night. Victor smiled down at Hope, who was trying to grab his finger. "Yeah, you could say I've changed." "Well, for what it's worth, I think it's good. Elena says Lena looks happier when we see her at the events. Says you actually smile now instead of just networking." "Elena's perceptive." "That she is. Listen, I know you stepped back from a lot of ventures, but if you ever want back in, the door's open. On your terms this time. Family first, business second." "I appreciate that, Marco. I really do. But I'm good where I am. I've got everything I need right here." After the call ended, Lena appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep. "Was that Marco?" "Yeah, checking in, offering me a way back into some of the businesses I left." "Are you going to take it?" Victor stood, still holding Hope, and crossed to where Lena stood. "Not a chance. I meant what I said in that hospital room. You and Hope are my priority. Everything else is just details." Lena smiled and kissed him, really kissed him, the kind of kiss that said she believed him, that said trust was being rebuilt, that said they were going to be okay. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm proud of you. You've kept every promise you made. You've shown up every single day. You've become the man I knew you could be. I'm still working on it, still going to therapy, still learning. But Lena, I promise you, I'm never going back to the man I was. The man who left you in the cold. That version of me died the night I saw you on that stretcher. The man I am now? He knows what matters, and he's never forgetting it again." Hope chose that moment to grab both of their fingers, her tiny hand bridging the space between them. And standing there in the home office, where Victor used to spend 70 hours a week building an empire, holding his daughter while his wife smiled at him with love and trust slowly returning to her eyes, Victor Romano finally understood what success actually meant. It wasn't money or power or fear or respect. It wasn't deals closed or territories controlled or enemies defeated. It was this: this moment, this family, this second chance he'd almost thrown away. It was choosing love over pride, presence over power. The people who mattered over the things that didn't. It was being the kind of man who answered his phone when his wife called, who came home for dinner, who held his daughter at 2 a.m. when she wouldn't stop crying, who showed up every single day, not because he was obligated to, but because there was nowhere else he'd rather be. That was success. That was empire. That was everything he'd been searching for in all the wrong places. And as hope yawned and snuggled against his chest, as Lena leaned into his side, as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the home they'd built together, Victor closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of meaning. The deep, soul-level certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the people he was supposed to be with, living exactly the life he was meant to live. He'd almost lost it all. Almost destroyed everything that mattered in pursuit of things that didn't. But he'd been given a second chance. A frozen night that had shattered his illusions and forced him to see clearly for the first time in years. And he'd taken that chance, fought for it, changed for it, became a different man for it. Not perfect. Never perfect. But better. Present. Real. The kind of man his wife could trust. The kind of father his daughter deserved. The kind of human who understood that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or negotiated or controlled, only loved and cherished and protected. Victor Romano had built an empire, but the kingdom that mattered was right here in his arms, and this time he wasn't letting go.